Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the fifth installment of the ACUHO webinar series, a new collaborative effort with our affinity networks designed to foster connection and learning across the field of campus housing and residence life. This free webinar series is part of ACUHO's ongoing commitment to spotlight timely topics and elevate voices from across our platforms and profession. We're so glad you've chosen to spend your afternoon with us. My name is Akshay Khatri, and I currently serve as the Community Coordinator in Residence Life at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And I'm honored to be joined by my esteemed co-chair, Puneet Patel, who serves as the Director of Residence Life at Keene University in New Jersey. For those who may be new to ACUHO, we are the Association of College and University Housing Officers International, dedicated to advancing campus housing and residence life globally. We are excited to welcome you to today's session. Our presentation today, Exploring the Intersection of Residence Life and Interfaith Work, will explore the intersections of interfaith engagement and residential life. Drawing on her experiences as a scholar, practitioner, and campus leader, Dr. Simran Kaur-Colbert, Director of the Center for Interfaith and Spiritual Life at George Washington University, will reflect on identity, inclusion, and the evolving role of student affairs in shaping religious, secular, and spiritual belonging. Before we begin, a couple of notes. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on the ACUHO YouTube channel following the webinar. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask Dr. Kaur-Colbert questions. If you have questions that you would like to be answered at the end, please utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We also encourage you to utilize the chat to engage with the information and your colleagues throughout. Your contributions are very valued. And with that, I'll pass it on to Puneet Patel.
Thank you, Daksha. Once again, it is my esteemed honor to introduce our speaker, Dr. Kaur-Colbert. Dr. Simran Kaur-Colbert is the inaugural director for the Center of Interfaith and Spiritual Life at George Washington University. She's earned her PhD in Student Affairs in Higher Education from Miami University at Oxford, Ohio, a master's degree in Diplomacy and International Commerce from the University of Kentucky's Patterson School, and a bachelor's degree in Business Administration and International Affairs from the University of Mary Washington. A community-engaged scholar, practitioner, and Dharmic scholar, Dr. Kaur-Colbert identifies as a critical religious pluralist and was recognized as a contemplative social justice fellow by the Association of Contemplative Mind in Higher Education in 2019. Her dissertation explored the development of essential worldview diversity infrastructures such as interfaith and spiritual life centers across both public and private universities. Her ongoing research interests include Asian Americans' mental health, interfaith, interracial families, Dharmic interreligious dialogue in American higher education, and community university partnerships for truth and reconciliation. Dr. Kaur-Colbert's career reflects a unique synthesis of scholarly expertise and hands-on leadership. Prior to her current role, she served as the Director of Student Engagement and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Elmhurst College and a Special Assistant to the Interim Vice President for Institutional Diversity at Miami University. Her broad experience in student affairs includes residence life, cultural centers, and first-year transitional and orientation programs. She also brings corporate experience from her time at Fortune 500 companies such as Geico and Fidelity Investments, as well as nonprofit leadership as chair of the board of the Oxford Interfaith Center in Butler County, Ohio. Dedicated to fostering religious, secular, and spiritual identity development, Dr. Kaur-Colbert is passionate about cultivating interfaith leadership and enhancing campus religious and spiritual climates to support student success. Her multifaceted career exemplifies a deep commitment to integrating academic scholarship with practical initiatives to enrich the higher education experience, promote holistic development, and nurture a profound sense of belonging. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Kaur-Colbert. The floor is yours at this time.
Dr. Simran, you're muted. It's okay.
I was saying earlier that I can tell technology is no longer as intuitive as it used to be for me, and I can certainly sense being an elder millennial. So yes, I was muted. Thank you so much, Puneet, Daksha, friends, for having me with you today for the time we have. I'm just honored to be here. I miss my time in residence life and education, and am so honored and excited to be here at George Washington University, where I get to work very closely with our campus living and residential education team, who do a phenomenal job when it comes to integrating interfaith work and engagement here. I will tell you a little bit about what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you and then tell you what I just told you, and then we'll have some questions and answers. So my name is Simran Kaur-Colbert. My name is a Punjabi Sikh name. It means meditation. I wish I did more of it. And so Kaur-Colbert, I get that hyphenated component from my marriage to my African American Christian husband, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself next. But first, what are we doing in our time together? I'm going to be speaking with you today a little bit about something that is so essential to student success in their undergraduate experiences when they're living on campus, that is building belonging. And in particular, I'm going to discuss with you today a little bit about what building belonging through interfaith engagement would look like, and what it looks like here at George Washington, what it looks like in my research, and walk you through and learn more about your journeys as well. So I'll just share a little bit about what drew me to interfaith work, identity being a foundation of what brings me to this work. It'll share some of the opportunities and challenges for interfaith work in residential contexts that I've uncovered through research and in the field of higher ed. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about how we build and are building the inaugural Center for Interfaith and Spiritual Life at George Washington University. We're in our inaugural year. This makes it about 7 months at George Washington for me, and tell you a little bit about the mission and values of the Division of Student Affairs here and how we're hoping to embed our center with those core guiding principles. What is your role in the role of student affairs professionals when it comes to interfaith engagement? We'll conclude with a call to action, and I'll give thanks again and have some question and answers together in our learning time today together. So, why am I doing this work? There is a NASPA article if you'd like to read a little bit more about what it means to be a scholar practitioner for me as a Sikh Punjabi American who is drawn to this work trying to find belonging myself as a first generation undergraduate student. Um, I didn't go to college necessarily to seek belonging, but if I had not found belonging, I would not be here where I am today. And at the intersection of my own identities, there were very few, if none, Punjabi Sikh faculty or staff that were represented at the university I went to. I had one faculty member who taught political science who was multiracial, and that was the closest I could find in terms of someone who might have even the cultural religious literacy to connect with me. But I found belonging not through those folks who I might have shared something with at my intersection of my culture or my religion or my gender. I found belonging from folks who did not look like me. We did not have the same caste, creed, culture, language, or class, but they knew what it felt like to be an outsider and talk to me about those things that were core to my identity, which is being Sikh. So I'll weave a little bit of that into this story. If you ever come across folks that have the last name Kaur or Singh, not all, but many will have that name if they are in the Sikh tradition. This egalitarian value from my own faith guides the naming of people in our tradition. So while it reinforces in some ways a gender binary woman with the last name Kaur and men with the last name Singh, it is something that is significant that comes about. So if you ever see someone with the last name Kaur Singh, don't be afraid to ask them about that component. So this is how I come to this work. Being first gen student, not seeing that religious identity was something that was understood, and making sense of then how do I make the most of my college experience? How do I get buy-in for my ideas, for the organizations that I want to start? How do I find a space to reflect and be myself, to meditate, to pray, if I might not feel that there's a space for that right now in my residence hall or an org that aligns with that, or even a faculty member who I can talk to that would be open to this topic of conversation without feeling stigmatized um, or judged, right? So to kind of answer that question, I took a nonlinear journey working initially in the private sector, as Puneet mentioned earlier, and staying there. Really trying to show my family, hey, that college is worth it. I have four younger siblings, so I definitely felt the pressure of the first daughter and going to college to say, hey, it's important to go to college. It's an important part of getting your foot in the door with any type of Fortune 500 company. And of course, doing that while pushing back against those stereotypes that tell South Asians that, hey, your only choice is either to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, and not thinking about what do you really want to do and enjoy, whether that could be gardening or writing or painting, and finding success through that. So that question nagged at me, how do we create that? How do we find that? And I wanted to explore so many topics, retention and student persistence. And somehow uh, I was guided to dig into and reflect on my own positionality. And that's where my research comes from. So I tried to then understand, how do colleges and universities go about creating the material resources, the actual spaces, the actual budget, the actual staff? How do we allocate those things that can create sustained growth and development over time, that can promote campus spiritual religious climate, student religious spiritual identity and development, and organizational development so that it meets what interfaith practitioners and interfaith workers, such as campus spiritual religious advisors, whether that's chaplains, whether that's student affairs practitioners who provide that support, can find success for not only the student, but for sustaining that success. Something that I talk about in this NASPA article I've got here is Atmadakam. Atma is a Sanskrit word for soul or spirit. It's Atmadakam is a term coined by one of my sister scholars, Victoria Gill, who says that it is finding a way to resist the ways that minoritized or marginalized scholars and practitioners are asked to um, uh, be less of who they are to succeed in spaces that have not historically been designed for us to express our identities. Um, so in this article, I talk about when you do this research and when you do this work, how do you do that in a way that allows you to honor who you are, but also be mindful of what you can do to protect yourself from burnout, what you can do to protect your spirit and stay whole in this process as you're also helping your students be whole too. So I invite you to look at that. And my work then brought me and introduced me to chaplaincy in higher education, and learned and worked very closely with Hindu chaplains, Buddhist chaplains, Sikh scholar practitioners, Jain scholar practitioners, who are doing the work of what are the needs of religious students, at the spiritual religious students, particularly dharmic students, as it contains to my own identity. But the work itself includes religious, secular, and spiritual. Secular being a word for atheist, agnostic, non-religious worldviews and belief systems. And thinking about how do we then provide the material resources at historically white colleges and universities, or colleges in the United States that have largely been derived or emerged from out of Christian worldviews and beliefs. So if you were to look at a breakdown of many colleges and universities in the United States, they have some ties, if not a tie, whether they're public or private, to a faith-based background. So for instance, at George Washington University, largely was founded by Southern Baptists. It is a private secular institution, but that is its background, right? Going back to the 1800s. So that's just the way higher ed in American education has kind of emerged. Um, and that is a little bit about who I am and why I do the work that I do and the research interests that I have. So if you're listening to this and you're a graduate, a student yourself, or thinking about, hey, how do I emerge and create new knowledge as self for the field? If there's something that you don't see reflected, think about how you can contribute to it. And this is my invitation for you to continue learning and being lifelong learners as well. So what particular experiences then made me shift from quarterly bonuses in the private sector to higher ed, where quarterly bonuses are not a deal? Um, what made me shift career patterns? Um, it was an unsettling ness in working in finance and insurance, thinking about what I want my own life's work to be and what that impact would be um, uh, beyond my own time. And I kept thinking back to how I've supported my four younger siblings and so many cousins and community members with finishing their high school degrees, and then going on to college. And back in 2014, I decided that I didn't want to climb corporate ladders, that I wanted to figure out how I could help more folks go to school and succeed. And the question that came up for me, where I felt the most alienated, was when you cross borders. And I'm not necessarily talking about the physical borders, but there's this notion of everyone should stay in their lane and people stay with their own kind. Um, and I have a sticky note in my office that I keep up all the time. It's like all people are created equal and we all bleed red. Um, and I keep that as a reminder. It's something that's there, but it's not so easy. Um, when we see other members ourselves, even sometimes our communities even struggling when they cross those borders of who they should be friends with or what they should explore, what they can be curious about, who and what they can have empathy for. Those are some of the guiding principles at George Washington University that make me so attracted to this division, because here we're doing interfaith engagement to help people hold on to those values. In my lived experience, when I became curious about other cultures, when I developed empathy for more people, um, and yeah, I'm going to say that right now. I didn't, I wasn't born woke. I wasn't born being aware of my own aspects of myself, of my own life that were ignorant, that I was ignorant about. And I'm not afraid to admit that. I'm nearing 40 years old, and I can say that as a Punjabi Sikh student growing up in an immigrant family, much of the stereotypes that exist in our United States society, much of the anti-Blackness in our society, much of the anti-LGBTQ sentiments in our society, stigma against atheists in our society, all those things is the water that I grew up learning how to swim in. And this was also normalized in the schools of fish that we might be in or the schools that we go to. And for me, coming to this work has been confronting and facing the ways those things have shown up for me in my life and others in my life, and trying to make it easier for others to overcome that and find joy in who they are and in the friendships and relationships that they build, even though they might be crossing those borders that their families might have set up for them, that their churches might have set up for them, that their masjids, synagogues, or gurdwaras or temples might have for them. For me, it was most apparent when I married someone from a different racial and religious tradition than my own. I had to confront those things in those folks who were most beloved to me, who had raised me, who had given me the meaning-making skills that I had learned. And I had to decide at that time if I was willing to step into who I was and make my own meaning making and my own faith my own, or be defined by the way elders and others in my tradition might, who come from different experiences, who have not had the privilege of being as highly educated or being introduced to others who live in other cultures than them. They didn't get to go to a 4-year residential campus college living experience like I did and live in a Korean and Afghan and Southern Baptist community with people of all different backgrounds and genders. They didn't have that. They grew up in what they knew, but their expectations for me were the same that they had and not those that had happened through my educational experience. So I realized that that was a part of my growth and journey and that I wouldn't be the only one. A lot of times in higher ed, folks will say, I'm the only, you might be the only in your setting, but there are so many people that are coming up behind us. So exploring that complexity, thinking about the ways that I was able to find healing from that initial alienation from family and other social systems of support around me, and to move forward at a time at the time of the publication of this article, which is Defending the Sikh Tradition. I provided a feminist perspective on my own interfaith and interracial marriage. This was the time of Mike Brown, George Floyd, leading up to that, building up to that, seeing many Americans speaking up across racial and religious backgrounds, not just in the United States, but globally, post an Arab Spring, people seeing that, hey, we have this globalized community now. We're able to share these perspectives broadly. How do we overcome the ways that we inflict violence on each other at all of these systems, whether it's intimate or societal? So started writing about that, and then hence looking into belonging and interfaith work. So opportunities and challenges in residence life. This is where students live. This is where they're going to live with someone for the first time of a different religious or non-religious background. It's the first time they might be leaving their hometowns where they grew up in the same home church from as far back as their memory can go, where they were baptized, where they learned, had their first Bible studies or Quran studies, where they learned how to write in Gurmukhi. I tried to do Sikh Sunday school for a little bit in Richmond Hill, Queens, but I was unwilling to learn my Gurmukhi letters, and still only know how to read partially in Punjabi. But these experiences that folks and students are moving away from happen in residence life. And so the expectations that students might have is that, oh, and their families might have is that this will be readily accessible, especially if they're the first in their family to go. They might assume that holiday calendars might align with their own. They may not know that they need to ask for accommodations for their academic calendar or schedules. They might not even understand what a syllabi is, that it's a contract between the educator and the student. And residence life staff and student affairs staff are like so essential in being able to understand and uncover what those needs are for students, because before a student might even verbalize it in a class, if they do that at all, they're more likely to verbalize it to their roommate, talk about it in passing in the hallway, um, ask for support from their peers. And their living space is their sanctuary. They're trying to make their sanctuary on university and college campuses. So I don't have the answers for all of the possible opportunities and challenges, but here are some that we became aware of in my role here at George Washington, and in conversations with our own residence life staff and in conversations with students in our community. We realized we needed, for Ramadan, which is a Muslim month-long holiday, which involves fasting and ritual practice and around prayer, communal prayer, that our Muslim students may have not had reserved spaces designated for where they might gather before sunrise or after sunset to pray in community. And I'm so proud to be at an institution where we were able to work with staff that championed creating those spaces. And you'll see on the left-hand side the multiple different spaces in residence halls where, for the first time ever at GW, such spaces were able to be designated and put together in residence halls in a way that had not been done in the past. On the right-hand side, you'll see ways that we had collaborated with our campus dining, and also at our university, dining halls are also inside of residence halls, in some of the residence halls. So making meal pass swipes available for kosher for Passover meals was made possible in collaboration with our campus partners, such as GW Hillel, our dining community, and we were able to receive input consistently from our colleagues across the division on those student needs. This is a work in progress. It is never finished ever in student affairs. Right now, more than 60% of students in higher ed are are white, Christian, and Protestant. And from what I looked at the Pew Research Center data most recently, at one point, folks thought that religiosity was in decline in the United States. It has now plateaued. So people are staying religiously aligned and affiliated. What that tells me about the future is that we will continue to see students who express a need for their religious identity to be more integrated into the academic calendar. What are the ways that our center is being built? How is it being shaped? What are some things that we're doing here at GW that those of you listening at your own home institutions might take back? We're very fortunate that our university president, President Granberg, has this our center as a presidential initiative as a part of the Strengthening Our Community framework at George Washington. And there's a commitment at the executive leadership level that makes our center possible. It allows us to then get the support we need through the Division of Student Affairs to lay the groundwork to cultivate sustained interfaith literacy and spiritual care on our campus. Some of the ways that I've started that since joining here in October is meeting with our students, met with each and every single religious, really spiritually or secularly identified student org, talked to them, gone to as many Bible studies and Diwali celebrations and Ramadan iftars and kosher food festivals and enjoyed that part of celebrating student identity and listening deeply to what students really want. Sometimes it's as simple as, having bidets and toilets in one area for ablution, right? It's the little things that make the big difference in sense of belonging for students and figuring out how to advocate for that infrastructure in future projects for building spaces in our campus community. Some of the signature programs I've had the pleasure of working on are Interfaith Week, working closely with student orgs around some of the initiatives you saw for Ramadan and Passover, and with our residence life camp partners in designating spaces where students can be together in communal meditation and reflection for those time periods. What are some guiding principles at DSA? Some of those I mentioned earlier: empathy, community, curiosity, critical thinking, and exploration. We need to continue to find ways to ask those questions of our students. To think about how we model inclusive practices and how we can embed interfaith awareness into broader fabric of university campus life. So one of the things that I'd encourage all of you to do, something that I encourage our team and our colleagues to do, is to ask those questions. If you don't understand a religious belief or tradition, if you don't know what a thing is called, if you're uncertain of how to say a particular name or what a holiday means, ask the question. Most time people will appreciate you exploring and being curious. If there's an opportunity for you to go to a faith zone training or to attend a conference, um, uh, plug here, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity is coming up at the end of this month, and I'm going to be attending to present on creating a roadmap for interfaith programming. Find opportunities within your or organizations to see if there's a way to learn more about it. Give yourself a pat on the back for being here today. You're doing something that helps you to seek that understanding of how religious and spiritual identity shape student development. Part of this also means advocating for infrastructure in your own environments that affirm religious, spiritual, secular identity. And from thinking about, hey, what are the spaces that already exist? What are the dietary needs that are being unmet? What is inclusive scheduling practices that we can build in to educate our students or inform our faculty on? Um, all of that is stuff that will help you just better support interfaith engagement and belonging. And sometimes it doesn't have to be uniquely just about the residential experience or roommate agreements or mediation. It's practical material stuff that is linked to their outside classroom experience as well as inside classroom experience. The most biggest challenge that I think, most biggest, hey, yes, challenge that I think we have is folks just not understanding that religious and spiritual and secular identity isn't separate from race, gender, sexuality, or mental health, right? It's deeply interconnected. And all of these things meaningfully support holistic belonging for the student. So when it comes to how we can better support that, it's in what we're already doing, identifying the spaces, the accommodations, the dietary needs, the actual lived experience that we can support for students. Again, the role of student affairs professionals, advocating for space, food, calendar adjustments, recognizing that religious identity is interconnected. I, in my research, actually use the phrase existential worldview diversity to encompass religious, spiritual, and secular identities. I try to move away from the word faith because so much of the language that we even use in our society um, when you think it has assumptions tied to it. So when people think of faith, they might immediately in the United States think, oh, evangelical Protestant or Christian. When you say faith in South Asia, where my origin is from, people might assume Hindu because that is the dominant religious Hinduism, or that you are a Hindu because that is the dominant religion there. So when we use certain words, they just, whether we want to or not, they have a certain connotation with them. So what are words that we can even use to change that? What does interfaith really mean? A lot of folks, when they hear the word interfaith, immediately assume it's folks that are just faith-based in the way that we think of dominant faith religions. They don't necessarily think about it as also being indigenous or secular beliefs, or those belief systems such as also Wicca, and or other communal belief systems that may not be as prominent, Baha'i faith, for instance, or religious ways. So that's why I use existential worldview diversity. There's no perfect way necessarily to capture the complexity of the ways people make meaning of their own life. But for the purpose of interfaith work, we'll stick to religious, secular, spiritual to at least broaden or attempt to broaden people's understanding of who we serve when we talk about that when it comes to our students. I'm leaving you all with a call to action. Sometimes building bridges is not easy. Um, and it's so easy to silo in student affairs and higher education, especially right now when a lot of small colleges and universities are struggling with retention and keeping enrollment numbers up. After the pandemic, those numbers may have not bounced back yet. Smaller institutions such as those I'm coming from in the Midwest, there's one small college closing every week in the United States. And it's easy in seeing those kind of facts and realities that folks want to protect and silo because there's this notion of scarcity in our society. But I encourage all of us to think from a place of abundance, that we don't necessarily have to silo to be successful in our work or to safeguard resources. We can be more effective when we jump out of that tendency to want to silo and guard resources rather than want to build bridges. So my call and ask for all of you to be is to reflect on how can we step out of those tendencies of peopling and deciding to silo and safeguard rather than thinking about abundance and collaboration. There's more possibilities that way, and it's possible and it works. What are some ways also that we can think about centering students' religious, secular, or spiritual identity when we have belonging conversations? If a student is not finding themselves fitting in their campus life or their residence hall, maybe it could be some things that they don't want to speak about because they might feel tabooed or stigmatized, and religion can fall under that area. Um, uh, those conversations that students might not have openly around, hey, what do you do when you're sharing a room with someone and you don't have a bidet, or you have a certain practice around the undergarments that you wear in certain traditions? These things that create intimacy and awareness about one another, that wouldn't be secrets in your own faith community, but might be outside of your own religious community. How do we help those conversations kind of move forward? Think about the folks who are champions for this work at your home institutions and find ways that you can continue to have that conversation. I'm really fortunate that I get to work at an institution where my colleagues are proactive, that we work together, that we're so welcomed, that we have a vision for taking those existing values in our division around empathy, community, curiosity, critical thinking, exploration, and weave them in. None of the prayer spaces in our student center, for example, are exclusive to any one faith group. Students who are curious about exploring Islam are welcome to go to the Muslim prayer space that is designated. Students who are curious about spaces that we're building for Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, and Jain students, they're welcome to go into those spaces, whether they are of that tradition or not. We want to create those environments where folks can create a sense of care, an ethic of care for one another, and understand that all of us are here, all of us belong, and really fortunate again to be in a division where, you belong here is a mantra, and an ethic and a vision. And our center is not different from that. We're woven into that ethic as well. With that, I hope that you'll connect with me on LinkedIn. I hope to see you if you're going to NCORE at the end of May. If you're ever in the Washington, D.C. area at George Washington, I invite you to find our center, currently located in the lower level of the Student Center. Again, thank you so much for your time, and it's been a privilege. I'll return the stage back to Daksha, Puni, and friends to open up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaur-Colbert, for your powerful reflections and for illuminating the importance of interfaith engagement in residence life. Your insights into fostering inclusive communities of care and building infrastructure to support the existential worldview diversity are both timely and so deeply impactful. On a personal note, I want to thank you, not just as a colleague, but as a mentor who has poured so much wisdom, support, and encouragement into my journey. You're truly amazing, and it's an honor to learn from you. And we're all better for the light and leadership you bring to our field. So thank you so much on behalf of PETA and ACUHO as well.
You're gonna make my voice crack over here.
No, Dr. Simran is truly an amazing person, and I am so privileged to get to know her. And I'm so lucky that you finally come to GW and I work with you every day.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so for those who don't know, I graduated from Mary Washington in 2011, and Doctor graduated nearly a decade later, and was able to tell me some of the orgs that I founded that were tied to my Sikh and Punjabi identity helped her to find belonging. And when she shared that with me, it was like a full circle moment about how it was that your journey makes sense in the end, no matter what area you start out on in higher ed. You're making an impact, and I'm fortunate that I get to see the outcome and the outputs of that work from my own student experience, and so many educators don't. So if you're an educator who's feeling burnt out right now or digging deep, I promise you there's someone who out there thinking of you right now, or really grateful for the impact you might have made, and they not even know who you are or your name, but you're doing the work. So just keep doing that. I promise you one day you'll find your Daksha who will tell you those things have made a difference.
Absolutely. And if folks are curious, it was the UMW Bhangra team. It was a dance team. So Dr. Kaur-Colbert, we do have one question in our Q&A section. So it says, I live and work in a conservative state that has passed numerous anti-DEI laws. Advice you would give to professionals to do this work under those circumstances? And it is.
I feel so deeply for my colleagues that are in those states where, or at public institutions largely, that are feeling more pressure than private universities in some ways in protecting those values. For inclusion. My advice to professionals working under those circumstances would be to, one, check in with yourself, and do the Atmadakam, which for me is figure out what you need to do to maintain your integrity and wholeness without feeling that you personally are becoming broken or corrupted by any legislation or law that might be making it challenging for you to include students that are of different identities and cultures and in serving their needs. One of the ways that I know folks are continuing to do that work at spaces where center names have been changed or staff has been cut, is to find those partners in faculty and find those partners off campus who can support that work. So for instance, your students who are atheists, your students who are Muslim, your students who might be of a certain Christian denomination, whatever perspective they're from, I'm telling you, there's likely a community in the United States in your corner of the world that is waiting for them nearby. In fact, I will try to find this map for you, but I will find it, and I'll share it with Daksha so he can send it to you. But there is a map where you can type in looking for houses of worship or even atheist community networks, and you can find a way to help those students by connecting through community engagement and leadership. So a core part of the ways that I found success in my experience doing interfaith work and truth and reconciliation work, um, I was in Oxford, Ohio, very red state. Butler County, very red state. That's where JD Vance is from. President JD Vance is Vice President JD Pants, origins from. My Punjabi came out. I called him Pants. JD Pants. So my Punjabi accent is emerging right now. But in that area, I was so surprised when I moved there that there was a Sikh Gurdwara, there was a masjid, there was a multiple different Christian denominations. There was a Jain community. In fact, the mayor of Cincinnati, a Punjabi Sikh Nepali gentleman. And if there was any student that would come to me when I was in Ohio or Indiana that needed to connect with a network, we were able to find them. The community members who lived in their counties, those families that lived in the counties, the houses of worship that were in those counties, don't discount them. Sometimes, if you cannot do the work on your campus, you can find a community partner off campus who is probably facing those same challenges. In those, this is not something that's new, right? Like the challenge for religious minorities or religious students, whether they're evangelical, whether they're dominant or non-dominant, feeling that they can't like fully express who they are on campus, right? For Christian students, that might be, are they able to vocally proselytize their peers in the way that they want to be, maintain religious integrity? For minoritized students, that's, hey, can I feel safe enough to do the same thing? So wherever you might be on the political spectrum, wherever that student is looking for belonging, if you're struggling with that, with the closing of a center or a changing of a policy or legislation in higher ed, I promise you there's a community off campus you can build partnership with. Bring those students there for interfaith dialogue. Bring those students there to do something together in community. Find a way to help them see themselves reflected as thriving people outside of higher ed. Because for so many students, the only time when they're in higher ed that they see other people like them is when they're in affinity orgs or when they're in their silos. And the work of interfaith practitioners, no matter what these laws is to live your whole life. My life is going to continue to stay interfaith. I'm going to continue to have Black Christian and white Christian and South Asian Muslim and Latino Catholic best friends. And that's not, none of these laws is going to change that. Our students' friendships and bonds aren't going to be erased because of that. And we can continue to foster those things, even if it's not on campus. So lean on those businesses in your communities, on your off-campus communities that are welcoming. Lean on those partners off campus that you can help create that with. Take your students to those states that have conferences for that opportunity. I think this is a pendulum. It swings one way and the other in a democracy. I hope we are still a democracy. I'm gonna stay with that. But I also am aware that there's 500 political scientists in our country that have come out with a statement saying that we're no longer a liberal democracy. So that's not me saying that. That's just me saying that's what research is saying, is that we're moving in a different direction. The more we dig into who we are, the more we hold on to our old bonds of friendship with people across difference, the more we can model for our students how we do that. Because just like our students, we're not at work all the time. Eventually, they're going to graduate and not be on campus all the time. So we have to show them what our life looks like outside of work, right? How do we continue to be who we are in environments and climates where we might not be able to say or express certain things, but that doesn't mean we move away from those values. And it's a difficult line to walk. It's a tightrope, and I don't know if I fully can answer that question, but hopefully I've given some ideas on how to think outside of the campus, to find partners and to find ways to support meaningful work for student belonging.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kaur-Colbert. Believe that is the only question. We'll ask one more time, any additional questions?
In the meantime, I'll just say anything good that I said today, I credit that to my own elders, to my own teachers, and anything that didn't make sense, was confusing, offensive, or hurtful in any way, that was completely me. So please don't take any faults of mine and put them to any of the educators or beloveds in my life. That's all me. I'm open to conversation, and I'm curious for those who ask that question, how do you eventually end up doing that? I'm doing my Atma Dakam. I pray every day before I come in. In my tradition, I do my meditation to say, hey, I'm not going to let this break me or corrupt me. Maybe I might not be able to put a pride flag up. Maybe I might not be able to say some things vocally, but that doesn't mean I don't love on the student when they're right in front of me and help them with their problem, right? How do I stay where I am to do and make the difference without risking not being here, right? And having, food on my own table, right? So those are the hard things that we do.
For sure. I think I can attest for the majority that we truly appreciate your wisdom. We accredit you with everything that you've taught us this afternoon, nothing that we need to discredit to the elders, as you would say. We credit you too. Thank you for your dedication and the work that you do on this topic and in the field, being a role model and your time this afternoon. So on behalf of APITA and ACUHO, once again, thank you. To our audience, before we close, just a few quick reminders and announcements. ACUHO will continue hosting several additional webinars throughout the month of May. The next one is presented by Cheryl Bolster and focuses on building an inclusive campus housing practices upon a universal design framework, which will take place next Wednesday, May 7th, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So please feel free to register. In addition, the APITA Network will host our next open meeting on Wednesday, May 21st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Please be sure to check your email and visit the ACUHO Networks page for additional details and registration links. We'd love to see you there at our upcoming session. Continue this conversation, continue to expand into the different topics and different challenges that we all continuously face in these current times that we are living in. And lastly, on behalf of ACUHO and APITA Professional Network, thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to continuing these important conversations with you down the line. And Dr. Kaur-Colbert, once again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for your time and your wisdom. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and may Godspeed be with you as closing is upon us all. That is also not lost. So thank you all.
All right, peace, folks. Talk to you later.